From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning and welcome to The Point on GB News with me, Andrew Pearce, and...
me, Dawn Newsom. I know.
Great joy.
Yeah, standing in today for the lovely Bev Turner, who's on a beach doing something really lovely and sunny and happy and stuff. And we're here in the studio, keeping you company. Now, Boris Johnson turns 59 today, another birthday, and he will get a rather unwelcome present from the House of Commons when his former colleagues vote on the partygate report, which accused him of lying. But many Tory MPs are expected not to turn up, including the current Prime Minister.
I bet you the Chancellor won't be there either. Joining us for the first time on the show is the former Tory MP David Warburton. He resigned at the weekend. He was caught up in a cocaine and sex sting with a newspaper. He's going to be a very interesting interview.
First time on GB News. Very excited by that, so stay with us for more. And mortgage misery millions. The Bank of England may raise rates again this week. Homeowners face huge increases in the repayments as their fixed deals come to an end. But the government says that there's nothing it can do. But get in touch at gbnews@gbviews.com and let us know what you think.
There'll be a huge failure to turn out of MPs. It won't just be the Prime Minister and the Chancellor.
They've got some really urgent things to do in their constituencies,
the Prime Minister's got an urgent meeting with the Prime Minister of Sweden.
Where he's going to get advice on how to have a really quick inquiry like they've done in Sweden.
On COVID.
Not. So that's not going to happen, is it?
Certainly not.
No, because that's going to go on until
2027.
27?
I think so.
Oh, my lordy, that's a long time. But what do you think? Get in touch at gbviews@gbnews.com. But first, here's your morning news.
With Tatiana.
Thank you very much and good morning. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. The Prime Minister is expected to skip a debate on the report that found Boris Johnson lied over Partygate. Rishi Sunak has this morning told reporters it's a matter for the House and not for the government. MPs will decide today whether to sanction the former Prime Minister after the Privileges Committee found he repeatedly misled the House of Commons. The committee recommended that Mr Johnson should face a 90-day suspension had he not already resigned in advance of his judgment. Well, it comes after the Sunday Mirror obtained video footage showing Conservative staff partying during the COVID lockdown and joking about restrictions at the time. Tory staff can be seen ignoring the government's social distancing rules at the height of the pandemic. 2 of the 24 people at the Christmas party were later handed honours by Boris Johnson. The Home Secretary is urging police chiefs across England and Wales to ramp up the use of stop and search powers. Suella Braverman said officers who use the powers have her full support to prevent violence and save more lives. However, critics of stop and search say it disproportionately targets black and ethnic minority communities. And homelessness charities have told the Prime Minister they're deeply concerned that the government will fail to meet its target of ending rough sleeping in England by next year. In a letter to Rishi Sunak, the organisation said the data shows we are going backwards in terms of meeting the goal. More than 3,000 people were sleeping rough on a single night in autumn last year. That's up 26% on the equivalent total for the year before. You can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com. Now it's back to Andrew and Dawn.
Good morning. Still to come this morning, we'll be joined by recently suspended Tory MP David Warburton right here in the studio. Very exciting.
Well, in fact, he's actually announced he's standing down together. He was caught in a cocaine and sex sting with a newspaper. Not the first, won't be the last,
no.
But first to the politics of the day. The explosive video showing staffers at Conservative Party HQ, dear me, revelling in the Christmas spirit during the COVID restrictions at a time, actually, when they've been tightened. The police looked into this. They had a still photograph. They're now looking into it again since they've seen that film footage.
Does it make a difference? We all saw the stills pictures, but you see the moving images and you think, I can't work out if it's arrogance or stupidity or a dangerous combination of both.
Well, and you can see that they're roaring drunk and they're also taking the mick out of the restrictions.
Yeah, oh God, we better keep 2 metres apart.
Yeah, ha, 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 very
Oops.
funny.
OK. Meanwhile, and former Prime Minister David Cameron will take the stand at the COVID inquiry later this morning as the austerity policies of his government are assessed for their impact on pandemic preparedness. Can't say that word.
But it's a big day for Boris Johnson because he is 59 today. If he has a party at his home in Oxfordshire, it can be within the rules because there aren't any to break. And, of course, there will be a vote by the Commons tonight after the Privileges Committee, ludicrously, in my view, suspended it for 90 days and revoked his right to a former MP's pass to enter Parliament.
So don't you think they'd have just handed it in any case? It's like, blow the lot of you, I'm just off now.
Well, the thing is, I wrote in my diary in the Mail today, John Bercow, revolting man, who was the Speaker, kicked out of he was suspended. He lost his pass into Parliament for bullying and lying to the committee for life. He was in the Parliament last week because somebody invited him to a party. So what's the point of it?
Well, there's a lot of parties going on in your world, isn't there?
There is.
I never get invited. But joining us now is someone who does like a party. And that's Olivia Utley from Westminster. Good morning, Olivia. Are you having a party there this morning?
Good morning. Don't seem to be having a party yet.
Doesn't matter, Olivia, go for it. Right, what's happening down there today?
Yeah, it looks like it's going to be quite an interesting day. We're expecting the vote to happen at 3:30 this afternoon, but the debate to happen at 3:30 this afternoon. But it's actually not clear whether it's going to go to a vote at all. There are plenty of cabinet ministers who've already said that they're not going to vote either way, that they're going to abstain. Rishi Sunak, it sounds like, isn't going to be there at all. He suddenly has an urgent meeting with the Prime Minister of Sweden. Michael Gove has said he's going to abstain. Mark Harper, the Transport Secretary, is going to be travelling, so he's not going to vote. And the government is tacitly encouraging MPs to go to Uxbridge to campaign in the by-election rather than be present in the House of Commons for the vote. There's only a one-line whip. It sounds as though there won't be very many Tories there at all. And even Boris Johnson's own allies sounds like they will probably just wave the report through. Over the weekend, Boris Johnson, perhaps for fear of an embarrassingly few allies standing up in support of him, has actually told his supporters just to wave the report through. So what might happen is after a sort of 2-hour or so debate at 3:30 this afternoon, the Speaker will ask MPs essentially if they are happy to wave the report through. Now, if a few of them stand up and say no, Bill Cash, one of Boris Johnson's most loyal allies, someone who is recognised in his resignations honours award list, may do that. But if he doesn't, then that report will simply be waved through. The findings of that report will be waved through. There will be no vote at all. And essentially, Boris Johnson's career will end with a bit of a whimper rather than a bang.
And my understanding, Olivia, is he doesn't want his MPs who still support him to vote because he doesn't, as you say, he doesn't want the numbers to be, only 18 or so voted against it. Is there a sense as well, with even amongst Tory MPs, if for God's sake, get this over and done with, or we're fed up to the back teeth with all of this?
There certainly is. I've been hearing that from quite a lot of Conservative MPs. That said, there are a few minister-level people in the cabinet and just junior to that who are a little bit worried about the precedent that this report is going to set. They're sick to the back teeth of Boris Johnson. They are perfectly happy to see him go. But there are people who feel as though the Privileges Committee did overreach, giving Boris Johnson a suspension so much longer than disgraced SNP MP Margaret Ferrier. And they're worried that this will mean that in future MPs, elected MPs, have to leave the House of Commons on the whim, essentially, of a small number of MPs. So there are concerns there, but I think those will be overshadowed by a general sense, as you say, that the best thing to happen now is that this whole issue gets put to bed.
Just finally, in the video horror, the video nasty from those twits at Tory Central Office getting sloshed during the partygate restrictions, one of them photographed is Ben Mallett, who got an OBE in Boris Johnson's resignation honours list. He also happens to advise one of the 3 London mayoral candidates, Moz Hussain. Is there a clamour among on the Labour benches for him to lose that OBE?
There certainly is. I mean, Keir Starmer is already saying this morning that he would scrap resignations honours altogether. These resignation honours do seem to have been a bit of a gift for Labour. Yes, there's Ben Mallett, there's also Charlotte Owen, Ross Kempsell, these pretty young, pretty junior advisors to Boris Johnson who seem to have been given peerages simply because he got on quite well with them. Rishi Sunak approved those honours. Possibly, it's been rumoured, simply to try and keep Boris Johnson quiet, to sort of hand him an olive branch. And of course, Boris Johnson then rather threw that back in his face by resigning in a very dramatic fashion from the House of Commons and triggering a by-election which Rishi Sunak desperately doesn't want. So there is pressure on Rishi Sunak to revoke some of these honours. Whether he'll go ahead with it now, I think it's quite unlikely. He is determined, as he keeps saying, to keep talking about his own agenda and keep delivering.
All right, that's Olivia Utley, our political reporter at Westminster. Piers Pottinger, one of our favourite political commentators here. Piers, you and I have written and talked about for years resignation honours lists. They nearly always cause trouble.
Yes,
because it's favours.
They do.
And not necessarily on merit.
And it's interesting, Keir Starmer saying he's not going to do a resignation honours list. He said, Tony Blair didn't, so I won't. Well, Tony Blair didn't, because at the time, if you remember, he was being investigated and the Labour Party were under great pressure over cash for honours.
That's right.
And that's why he didn't dare produce a resignations honours list. It wasn't out of principle. But, I mean, it goes back to
and he was interviewed by the police.
Absolutely.
In Downing Street.
It was very serious. But the most famous resignation honours list was really Harold Wilson's, or Marcia Faulkner, his secretary, private secretary, known as the Lavender List, when it was produced, because she wrote it on her lavender notepaper, apparently. I mean, I must admit...
And she was on it, of course.
And she was on it herself, yes, she got a peerage. But, I mean, this list from Boris does no one any favours, especially the poor people who've got them. And in fact, you do question some of them for actually accepting them. I mean, Charlotte Owen, who is 29, the youngest member of the House of Lords.
Ridiculous.
And she now is going to be under such scrutiny for everything she does or doesn't
do.
I would think it's going to be a pretty hellish existence in the Lords.
That's actually a fair point. I hadn't thought of that, Piers, because she is only 20.
Yeah.
She's very young, and all this attention focused on her. Why has she got it? What's her relationship with Boris Johnson? All sorts of rumours flying around.
Of course, absolutely.
She's a 29-year-old young woman at the end of the day.
And you want people in the House of Lords, because you can appoint, you want people there who are going to bring something to the table, some experience
and wisdom.
Yeah, and you don't have much at 29.
No, exactly, and she has very little.
Yeah.
So I think, but again, the vote today on the Privileges Committee is... Again, people keep talking about partygate. It's not about partygate.
No, it's not.
It's about misleading the House.
Yes, that's right.
And Boris Johnson did that, according to the report, 5 times, which is unheard of.
Yeah.
And therefore, it is an immensely serious offence in the House of Commons. John Profumo, of course, most famously misled the House, but this is even more of a famous incident because he was the Prime Minister at the time. And it is serious. And actually, I don't think much of MPs who abstain from voting. I think it shows great weakness. And if Bill Cash, who is, of course, a great stickler for detail, as we know, decides to push for a vote...
Which I think he will.
I think he will too, and I think there will be a vote, and of course it'll go through because it's not going to be opposed by the opposition. But, again, it's a very sorry state of affairs, and it's the last thing the Conservatives need at the moment.
Well,
but coming down the line, we've got another resignation on his list, Liz Truss. She was only there for 49 days.
Exactly.
And we understand there are 4 people going to the House of Lords from her list.
I think 2 of them might be Ant and Dec. I mean, the way the House of Lords is going, it's going to, I mean, at least a bit of entertainment doesn't go amiss.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, but I mean, that will cause another big stink, won't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Surely she can't. Surely if she had half a sense of propriety, she would just say, no, I don't think I should do this.
Well, if I was advising her, I'd tell her not to do it, I must say. Yes.
Piers, do you think, I mean, the Sir Bernard Jenkins, the Mail papers have been big on this one, actually been found to attending a drinks party as well, and he was on the committee, finding Boris Johnson guilty. Do you think the fact that Sir Bernard Johnson may or may not have attended a drinks party as well, do you think that negates what has been found to Boris Johnson to have found to have been done?
No, I don't think it does. I don't think it makes Bernard Jenkins look very good, but I do think also that, I'm afraid, over time, and with the inquiry into COVID going on, I'm sure there'll be lots more of these parties that happened that we haven't yet heard about, suddenly emerging, as they say, for political or spiteful reasons. But no, I don't think it detracts from that, although if I was him, I mean, unsurprisingly, he's shied away from commenting because I think he probably feels rather guilty about it all.
You want to talk about Nicola Sturgeon? I want to talk about Nicola Sturgeon.
Everyone wants to talk about Nicola Sturgeon.
Because she was photographed back at home yesterday for the first time. She lives in a suburb of Glasgow. She's back to work this week in the Scottish Parliament. She said she's innocent of all charges, but it is an historic position, isn't it? Another Scottish First Minister arrested and interviewed under caution by the police as a suspect for 7 hours.
But actually, you know, Sturgeon is a master communicator, or mistress communicator, and she chose her words very carefully yesterday. She said that she had done nothing wrong. She didn't say she hadn't done anything illegal. Now, if she's setting up her defence, which is what I think she was doing yesterday, many people who commit crimes would say, I've done nothing wrong, and the law is an ass.
Yes, I see what you mean.
I thought very carefully, I mean, she thought about every single word. She made a statement, no questions left. And if you look at every word, that's the key with her. It's what she didn't say. And she didn't say, I'm innocent of all charges. She didn't say, I have not broken the law. She said, I have done nothing wrong.
She said it more than
once. I know I have done
yes.
nothing wrong. But you see, that's different.
Yeah.
So I think it's the beginning of setting up her defence. She said she's going back to Parliament this week and will be available for more questions. But I mean, that in itself is ridiculous because she won't answer any of them. And on top of that, at the weekend, the most sensational claims have now come from a whistleblower, which the police have acknowledged they're investigating, about a businessman in Scotland handing senior SNP members cash in envelopes to the tune of tens of thousands of pounds. And this man is related to a senior SNP figure. Now, everyone in the Scottish Parliament knows who this man is.
Yeah.
But again, the Scottish press, I know the laws of contempt are very strong in Scotland and the press are terrified of it, but they seem to be more terrified of the SNP because, I mean, if this was happening in England, the press would be all over it. Yeah. There'd be all kinds of additional information. But the SNP have done a brilliant job at locking this down.
This is what you get when you've been in power for 15 years.
Absolutely.
You
People
can control.
are terrified.
You have a great control.
Absolutely, and she seems to be still wielding that power. Now, Humza Yousaf, the leader of the SNP and the First Minister, is now trying to divert this story. But he promised transparency and a new era for the SNP. We've had none of that. It's simply getting worse and more deeper into the quagmire surrounding this party. Now, the party is in government. It is incredibly serious. And it really is about time that Mr. Yousaf was called to account properly by the Scottish press.
You think as well that she would have been suspended pending the outcome of the investigation? Because that's what happens often.
Absolutely.
And she, as leader, was ruthless. She would have chucked any of her members who were being investigated by the police over allegedly missing money.
For less.
For less, exactly.
And they also keep talking about she was released without charges. Well, no charges have been brought yet because the police have not finished their inquiries. So, yes, of course, everyone is innocent until proven guilty, but she has been arrested and interviewed as a suspect in a very major criminal inquiry. Now, I think that alone, if you had any honour, Nicola Sturgeon would step aside on her own volition, but she hasn't given any sign of doing that. No. Far from it. What she started at the weekend in that interview was the beginning of her defence.
This is somebody who's advised politicians who've had their backs to the wall many times, which is why he's such an authority, is because I could lost count of the number of politicians, Piers, who advise her in a lot of trouble about what they can and can't say.
So would you have advised her to do that, Piers, to go and stand in front of the cameras?
No, because I think she's... I mean, the people investigating and the prosecutors, this will simply spur them on. And I think also she's going to look, if things turn out badly for her, which I fear they will, she's going to look very foolish. I mean, it's far better to say nothing. The point is she can't stay away. Once you're in power, it's very hard to let power go. And she likes to be in charge, running things. She wants to get back in Parliament, control the rumour mill, make these comments, keep saying I've done nothing wrong, and try and establish the beginning of her defence. That's what she's up to.
She's almost in denial.
Yes.
I mean, wouldn't you forget one of the other two people arrested? The question for hours was Peter Murrell, her husband, chief executive of the SNP since 1988, who signed off the accounts, which she signed off, and there's the third person, Mr. Treasurer, who signed off the accounts. And we've got to remember, it's £666,000, coincidentally the sign of the beast, that is unaccountable for. You don't do a book of Revelations.
I do, but I'm surprised you thought about it that much.
But it's a lovely time of year in Scotland. And what I would do if I was her is get in a camper van with her husband and go for a nice holiday in the Trossachs.
We'd like to know where that camper van is, actually. When she disappeared from view after being arrested, I said, find the camper van.
Well, the police
you might
have
find
got it,
Nicola Sturgeon. They have got it.
Yes, absolutely.
The camper van that was on her 92-year-old mother-in-law's drive
for
political party campaign. Do you think 92-year-old mother-in-law was driving the camper van?
Popped out to the Trossachs, as we say. Just one thing, Piers. I'm fascinated by the fact that Nicola Sturgeon, Boris Johnson, Donald Trump in America, all incredibly controversial figures, but they seemingly can do to their fans, and they are fans, aren't they? Can do no wrong.
Up until now, the last poll over the weekend showed that Sturgeon's popularity had plummeted since her arrest. The Scots are no fools. Once they smell a rat, they don't like it. And, I mean, her popularity, even though she may be in denial, has vanished.
There was also a poll, it's not of Tory party members, but a reference, I think it was in the Sunday Times yesterday, that Boris Johnson is now less popular than Philip Schofield and I think President Xi of China. That's a pretty big fault.
I've never been asked any of these questions.
I've never been asked a question ever by a pollster.
No, me neither.
No, but I mean, Boris, poor chap. I mean, if his opening column in I'm afraid, your newspaper, if he's going to write about miracle cure weight losses, I would wonder whether the Mail are paying him
I'm sure
rather too much.
I think he's biding his time until he ventures back into the political arena.
I think there was hidden messages in that column.
Do you?
He was quoting Shakespeare about, paraphrasing here, folks, about never trusting small, skinny men.
Yeah. Is the Prime Minister small and skinny?
Yes.
No.
Or is it me?
Well, possibly.
I'm quite skinny.
I mean, it might have just been an honest quote from Shakespeare, but I was reading a lot of messages in that.
And Boris Johnson knows Shakespeare inside out because, of course, he's writing a biography of William Shakespeare,
yes, exactly,
which he's supposed to have handed in some years ago, as I recall. He can get on with it.
Well, maybe his next column will be more illuminating.
I'm sure it will be. Good plug for the Daily Mail, of course. We're very pleased to have it. I tell you, every paper in Fleet Street wanted that column, didn't they?
Yeah, how much are you paying for it?
Don't
Go
know.
on. Go on.
That is so above my
Boris was
pay rise
getting
check.
$275,000 from his previous newspaper for a column.
The Daily Telegraph, but he fell out with them badly.
Yeah.
Or they fell out with him badly.
He falls out with a lot of people.
Yeah. And I used to deal with his column sometimes. He was always late, and he never wrote what he said he was going to write.
Oh.
And when you rang him back, the phone was switched off.
So
But it was always beautiful. No, you couldn't change his you couldn't change a word.
Yeah, it was literally, because we're both columnists, and you literally
not a word.
You can't change any of it.
It was very frustrating, but beautifully written every time. Piers, thank you for coming in.
Thank you so much. Illuminating as always. Right, OK. Coming up, we're joined by recently suspended Conservative MP David Warburton, caught up in a cocaine sting. He's resigning a fourth by-election, another headache for Rishi Sunak. Don't go anywhere. This is To The Point on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. It's generally a showery picture as we start off the new working week. It's all due to low pressure that is in control of the weather across the UK, bringing unsettled conditions, particularly so for Scotland first thing. This occluded front has been pushing its way northwards overnight, bringing some heavy rain, and there is a rain warning in force until 12 o'clock today. Could be some surface water issues until that eventually clears. Will be quite breezy across the northeast as well throughout this morning. A drier start to the day elsewhere, but into the afternoon the sunshine is strong and it will help develop some showers. They could be locally heavy with some thunderstorms, particularly for parts of Northern Ireland and maybe southern Scotland later on. Generally further towards the south and east, staying drier with some sunshine, and in that sunshine climbing to highs of 25 or 26 degrees Celsius. As we head into the evening, there'll be some late sunshine for many of us, and the showers will gradually ease their way off, taking longest for parts of the north and west. But clear spells developing overnight. Might see some isolated mist and fog patches forming underneath those clear skies. Remaining quite humid for many of us, particularly across southeastern areas of England as we feed in this cloud and rain from the continent. Temperatures holding up around 14-15 degrees Celsius, but might drop into single figures in some rural areas. Throughout Tuesday, then, we are watching this area of heavy rain push up from the south. There is still uncertainty in regards to the exact details and track of this, so do stay up to date with the forecast. But it could bring some torrential downpours of rain with some thunderstorms as well. Whilst it'll be a drier start for Scotland and Northern Ireland, again, heavy showers and thunderstorms could develop into the afternoon, and some surface water issues are possible. Temperatures, if you see some of the sunshine, climb to highs in the low or mid-20s. So we head towards the middle part of the week. High pressure is wanting to reclaim control, so the showers will generally become fewer and less intense as we head towards Thursday, and it'll also be that little bit less humid. Bye-bye.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good morning and welcome to Point on GB News with me, Andrew Pearce.
And me, Dawn Neeson. And, well, it's spelt wrong on there as well. In just a few moments, joining us on the show is former Conservative MP David Warburton, who resigned at the weekend after admitting taking cocaine.
First time on GB News, it'll be a very interesting interview. And Boris Johnson, he turns 59 today, but he's not going to get a very nice birthday present from the House of Commons. His former colleagues are voting on the partygate report, which has said if he was still an MP, he'd have to be suspended for 90 days. Many Tory MPs won't turn up, including the Prime Minister, the Chancellor, the Transport Secretary. The list goes on.
It's amazing how busy they all suddenly are, isn't it?
That.
Right, and mortgage misery for millions of us. The Bank of England may raise rates again this week. Homeowners face huge increases in their repayments as their fixed deals come to an end, but the government says there's nothing it can do. Get in touch at gbnews at gbviews.com and let us know what you think.
At least when Boris has his birthday cake today, he won't be breaking any rules.
Well, no, you hope not. Well, I mean, I'm sure...
He's at home.
Well, actually, we don't know what rules Carrie's put in place, do we?
And if you're watching Boris, happy birthday from GB News.
It's great here. So let us know what you think on all of these stories. Not about what we think, it's about what you think. So let us know what you are thinking about Boris' birthday cake. Anything you want to talk about. Email gbviews at gbnews.com. But first, let's get you up to date on the latest news with the lovely Tatiana Sanchez.
Dawn, thank you very much and good morning. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. The Prime Minister is expected to skip a debate on the report that found Boris Johnson lied over Partygate. MPs will decide today whether to sanction the former Prime Minister after the Privileges Committee found he repeatedly misled the House of Commons. The committee recommended that Mr Johnson should face a 90-day suspension had he not already resigned in advance of his judgment. However, Mr Johnson's decision to stand down with immediate effect means MPs will no longer be voting on his future in Parliament. It's understood his supporters are being encouraged to abstain.
Well, this committee was established under the former Prime Minister. It commanded the confidence of the House at the time, and I'm sure that they've done their work thoroughly, and I respect them for that. Obviously, this is a matter for the House, not for the government, and that's why each and individual colleagues will make up their own mind when the time comes.
So are you not going to be there?
I said each and individual colleague will make up their own mind when the time comes. This is a matter for the House rather than for the government. It's an important distinction, and that's why I wouldn't want to influence anyone in advance of that vote.
Rishi Sunak there. That comes after the Sunday Mirror obtained video footage showing the Conservative staff partying during the COVID lockdown and joking about restrictions at the time. Tory staff can be seen ignoring the government's social distancing rules at the height of the pandemic. 2 of the 24 people at the Christmas party were later handed honours by Boris Johnson. Shadow Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds says he accepts the conclusions of the report.
Even I, as a Member of Parliament, am
so tired of this Conservative soap opera. I just read that report because it's going to be parliamentary business today. The case is forensically laid out. It is damning. It is absolutely clear and straightforward and accessible in how it analyses what the former Prime Minister did and why that was unacceptable. And that's why I'll be accepting the conclusions of that report and voting for it today.
Breaking news in the last hour, David Warburton has officially resigned as an MP following accusations of sexual harassment and cocaine use. The decision means Rishi Sunak faces another potentially difficult by-election in the Somerton and Frome seat vacated by the former Tory MP. The 57-year-old was suspended from the party in April last year pending the outcome of an investigation. Mortgage rates in the UK have reached a new high this year, increasing costs for borrowers and those who want to purchase a home. A 2-year fixed home loan now has a rate of just above 6%, according to financial firm Moneyfacts. Interest rates have been raised 12 times since 2021 in a battle to tame inflation. This morning, the Prime Minister ruled out any extra government assistance for households struggling with payments. The Home Secretary is urging police chiefs across England and Wales to ramp up the use of stop and search powers. Suella Braverman said officers who use the powers have her full support to prevent violence and save more lives. However, critics of stop and search say it disproportionately targets black and ethnic minority communities. Strikes within the healthcare system have resulted in over 500,000 NHS appointments, operations and procedures being postponed in England. Industrial action began towards the end of last year in the bitter ongoing dispute over pay. Nurses held their first ever mass walkout in December, with ambulance workers, physiotherapists and other health workers following suit. In March this year, junior doctors began their first in a wave of strikes, causing further disruption on the service. Sir Keir Starmer will pledge to cut bills, create jobs and provide energy security in a speech later. The Labour leader is expected to set out new targets to reduce the time taken to complete clean power projects from what he says years to months. The party has also committed to a local power plan, which it says will allow UK households to receive discounts on their bills if their area signs up to new green initiatives. Now, the London mayor is warning the threat of terrorism is still very real 6 years on from the Finsbury Park attack. Makram Ali died and 11 others were injured after Darren Osborne drove a van into worshippers outside the Muslim Welfare House shortly after Ramadan prayers. He was found guilty of terrorism-related murder and jailed for life. Sadiq Khan says the local community's reaction to the attack showed how Londoners will always stand together. Homelessness charities have told the Prime Minister they're deeply concerned that the government will fail to meet its target of ending rough sleeping in England by next year. In a letter to Rishi Sunak, the organisations said the data shows we're going backwards in terms of meeting the goal. More than 3,000 people were sleeping rough on a single night in autumn last year. That's up 26% on the equivalent total for the year before. And new research shows employment for those over the age of 65 has reached a record high, reaching 1.5 million for the first time since records began. Restless has found the employment rate of the over 65s is now at 12%, the highest it's ever been. The group says it's driven by different factors, including an ageing population, increases to pension age and the cost of living crisis. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Andrew and Dawn.
Thank you very much, Tatiana. Welcome back and good morning. Well, as we look ahead to this afternoon's vote on the Privileges Committee report, many on the backbenches have decried the findings, shouting "stitch up" on behalf of the former Prime Minister.
Rishi Sunak is staring down the barrel, though, of not 3 by-elections, but 4, because the latest one is David Warburton, who's the MP for Somerton and Frome, who announced at the weekend he's resigning. He's the one who was caught in a sex and cocaine sting involving a newspaper.
And yeah, absolutely, announced stepping down in the wake of the sex and drugs scandal. And I'm absolutely thrilled to say that David joins us in the studio. GB News First, I believe?
It is.
Exactly.
It is.
Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Good to see you. I'm just going to ask the typical question. How are you feeling now? I mean, this was in the papers at the weekend, your name, your family. How are you feeling?
To be honest, a huge sense of relief, and release. At last I can talk about this. This stuff's been going on for a year, more than a year, 15 months. And I've not been able to speak out and say a single word against repeated allegations that appear against me. And it's been horrifically difficult keeping that silence, and tough for my family too, and tough for the people who know the other side of the story, as it were. But so it's great to be free and to be able to say what I like. I'm only one day into it, so that may change.
Just make it clear, what are the allegations actually against you?
Well, I'm not allowed to.
Well, I can say it.
Oh, right, you can
I can say it for you. So you were you were in your home with a young woman. There was you were a newspaper sting. You were being secretly photographed for a sex and drugs involving cocaine, which of course you've campaigned about in the Commons.
Yeah.
So you were being, by your own self-assessment, idiotic, David.
Absolutely, 100%, absolutely idiotic. And I made a ridiculous decision and a silly mistake. I was led down a pathway. I was caught. I was photographed, deliberately set up, and I fell for it. It was naivety and stupidity. There's no question about that.
And while you can complain about a sting and being ensnared, nobody forced you to go into that room with that young woman. Nobody forced you to stick cocaine up your nose, and nobody forced you to drink copious quantities of that very strong Japanese whiskey.
No, they certainly didn't. And I have to say that I've been teetotal for the last year, and I intend to stay that way because I certainly learnt a lesson. But you're right. I made the decision to do that, and I didn't have to say I did it, but I'm standing up because I want to tell the truth about everything.
Your wife Harriet has stood by you. Not all wives would.
No, she's been fantastic throughout. Yeah, she has stood by me 100%, and it's been incredibly difficult for her and for my children. It's been a hard time. I mean, initially, when this all broke, I couldn't cope with it, and I literally collapsed, and I couldn't hardly walk, and I went to a psychiatric hospital. Meantime, she had to go into hiding with the kids from the press who were all over the house, and they visited our respective parents and my brother and her brother and so on. The press were all over the country trying to get hold of me or her, and then when she did go back home with the kids, I was still incarcerated, but she had to sort of black out the windows, and the kids weren't allowed to go in the garden because there were photographers everywhere. It was a really difficult time.
But partly, if you hadn't gone there in the first place with that woman, none of that would have happened.
Well, yeah, to be honest, though, that actually wasn't part of any allegation. That's never been investigated, and that was never part of any investigation in Parliament or anywhere else. It was other investigations, two other investigations that Parliament looked at, one of which was completely dismissed, and the other one which is technically still ongoing. But in order for me to talk about the process of how the ICGS, which is the watchdog, the parliamentary watchdog, how appalling and what an astonishing abuse of power they wield over all of us. In order for me to talk about that, I can no longer be an MP because they don't allow you to talk about it even after the result comes out.
So you weren't allowed to talk and give evidence to the inquiry on your own behalf?
No, I can give evidence to the inquiry, but it remains absolutely confidential, and I can't speak out, so nobody knows. And even after they produce the results, even after you're found not to have done these things, you must remain silent about it, not only about it and about the charges and about their decision, but also about the processes of how they came to make their decision. And that's the bit that really is galling. For example, I must say that they have denied me any witnesses. So all my witness evidence, they say, no, we can't look at that. They denied me all. I provided more than 4,500 items of contemporaneous documentary evidence. They said, no, that doesn't count. We're not looking at that. They said themselves that the investigation took more than a year, so it was a flawed investigation. But they say, because they took so long, and because they made such a mess of it, and they know it's flawed, they're not going to do it again, because it would take a long time again. So we have to just accept the results of that flawed investigation. And they also said that of my complainants, one of them lied, they admit one of them lied to the watchdog about going to the press, another one falsified evidence with a fake video, another one falsified a document, a reference, and we've got manipulated surreptitious photos, manipulated recordings, you name it. But all of this they cast aside in order to come to the decision that they'd already decided.
There's been lots of talk, you know, kangaroo courts and witch hunt. They seem to be on a daily basis in Parliament now. Is that how you would describe you've been treated?
100%, yeah. A baby kangaroo, a wallaby court. Yeah. I mean, it isn't any sort of a judicial process. That's the other thing. They're not allowed. There's no place you can go to appeal again. There's no judicial oversight of their procedures. They just make the decision. They make the rules by which they make their decision. Then they make their decision, and then you're stuffed. That's the end of it.
And you continued as an MP for the last year, but you were not allowed to set foot on the parliamentary estate, which I think is staggering.
I haven't seen my office for more than a year.
So you have to do it remotely.
Do it all remotely. That's right. And the reason for that is, as soon as it was all over the newspapers, they felt that if I turned up in Parliament, then people might throw up their hands in horror. So I should.
I thought a man was innocent till proven guilty.
Well, that's exactly what you would have thought.
And of course, I don't want to get dragged into Boris Johnson, but his point about the Privileges Committee, the sentence from the Privileges Committee was longer than for him allegedly misleading Parliament. They whacked him for an extra 50 days because he had the temerity to criticise the process of the Privileges Committee.
And that is a specific point that they made to me as well, that if I speak out or make criticism of them publicly,
the mother of all parliaments,
then I will pay for that as well. So my only route out is to resign and you're going to say, well, I can say what I like now.
At a by-election which the Tories will probably lose, even though you've got a 20,000 majority.
Well,
why are you smiling?
I don't mean to smile. It's going to be tough for them. I mean, I've won 3 large majorities in a row, but prior to that, it was a Lib Dem seat for 18 years, over 4 elections. So it's going to be difficult, and the government obviously is facing 3 other by-elections and all sorts of other woes coming out daily. So it's a tough time for a by-election for them.
You had care, you had mental problems. Are they all fixed now?
100%, yeah.
You're looking well.
Thank you. No, absolutely. It was an extraordinary time. Yeah, I spent 6 weeks in a psychiatric hospital, and I learnt a huge amount in doing that. I mean, I've campaigned on mental illness before, but it's something that I really want to do much more of now because it's a hidden thing.
You also used to campaign against cocaine. There you were sticking it up your nose in that
I did.
Sting.
I did campaign against cocaine, and I will also continue to campaign against cocaine. I made a big mistake in doing that. I was led to make a big mistake in doing that. And that's something that anybody could fall into. That doesn't make the campaigning wrong. The campaigning, if anything, it makes the campaigning more important because it shows that this can happen to people.
Two things here. I mean, the fact that, you know, it's the mother of all parliaments, this amazing democracy, can treat someone so badly, it drives them. You're feeling suicidal at one point.
100%. Yeah, I was on suicide. They were checking on me every 15 minutes, and they removed my belt and my shoelaces, and there's no sharp objects or glass in the room, and all the rest of it. So yeah, I was, and then I had NHS visiting me twice a day, the crisis team at my flat, and I had to have round the clock support from friends.
Which is horrific that, you know, basically your job has led to this situation. But as Andrew did allude to, I mean, you were stitched up, but to a certain extent you stitched yourself up by putting yourself in that position.
No fool. Would you admit to no fool like an old fool, David?
Yeah, there certainly isn't, yeah, and I am an old fool. I've been an old fool, no question about that. I fell into it, it happened to me. I think it's possible that it can happen to anyone there, and I think people are vulnerable to this. And people are vulnerable in Parliament as well. And should this happen to them, at least you expect a proper process looking into it and discovering the truth of the matter. And that's what's shocked me.
Dave, we've only got time for one more question. You've had 10 years, 12 years, 13 years in the House. What are you going to do next? Have you got a job lined up? What are you looking at? I'm
looking at all sorts of things. I'm hoping to go back to business, back to music, my true love. And but in the meantime, yeah, I'm applying to do... I could be an Amazon delivery driver. It's true, don't laugh.
Really? Would you do that job?
Yeah, I'd do anything, yeah. I've done many. I've been a cleaner, I've been a van driver, you name it, I've done jobs. And, yeah, I'm not ashamed to do anything at all.
Music, are you a singer?
No. Oh, you don't want to hear me sing, no.
What I was going to ask him. He was a singer. You could feel it coming, couldn't you?
Play guitar?
I can play the guitar, yeah, very badly.
Well, David, thank you for coming in and being so frank, and the very best of luck. And has Rishi Sunak sent you a thank you for all your support card?
Not yet. It may come.
I was going to say that a few more scandals possibly to break. What advice, quickly, would you give to people involved in your situation?
I would say speak out. I would say don't keep quiet. Take no notice of the confidentiality. Nobody else does, and there's no penalty to them.
What could they have done to you?
Exactly.
Well, yeah. Nothing worse than you did to yourself, actually.
Yeah. That's David Warburton,
Thank you.
former MP for Somerton and Frome. Thanks for coming in.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, it's not an easy conversation to have either, is it? I mean, but I do find it appalling that our Parliament actually leads to someone feeling suicidal. Obviously, you know, not entirely to blame. I mean, you know, as David's just admitted, he did bring this on himself to a certain extent, but the fact that you're spat out like that.
I know.
Right, OK, to get more on this story and others, Charlie Rowley, former Special Advisor to current Housing Secretary Michael Gove, is also with us. Charlie, good morning.
Good morning.
Now, your former boss has apologised for that damning video showing the... well, we all know the video by now.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen it, it's out there. It's very bad dancing, very bad jumpers at Christmas, breaking all the rules ever.
Really bleak, Charlie.
It is, and I think, look, we knew about this particular event. There was a still image, a still photograph of a group that were at CCHQ that had come together, which has been released. But the images, the video that we're watching now, just opens up all the old wounds that many, many people across this country who suffered because of COVID, who lost loved ones, will be looking at this video and thinking that the Conservatives were just running amok and taking
and you can actually hear on the audio, oh God, they're filming it. As long as it's not streamed, they're mocking the rules. One of them got the OBE in Boris Johnson's resignation honours list, and he's advising one of the mayoral candidates. Has he got to withdraw from that? He's advising Moz Hussain, Mr Ben Mallet, OBE, who you all know, of course.
Well, I do, and but I think, you know, these are decisions for individuals.
Now, what do you think?
Well, I think it's a question for the mayoral candidate whether he feels that he can have confidence in the team that he has around him, and so it could be a decision for both Ben and that particular candidate. I think Ben, for what it's worth, who I have worked with, has great abilities. He has great potential as a young political thinker, strategic decision maker that's contributed to the party. He has made a huge error of judgment here. There's no excuse, there's no getting away from it. I can't echo enough probably what my former boss said yesterday, that it is indefensible. But these are, you were talking about, you know, no fool like an old fool, just to quote David there. These are young, foolish people. That is absolutely no excuse. But they are clearly have made a huge...
And one of the mitigating factors, you could argue, about some of the events that happened in Downing Street, they were in a hot house, COVID, it was where they work. They were there sometimes 18, 20 hours a day. They're desperately trying to find a way to limit the spread of this terrible pandemic. There's no excuse here. They're in Tory Central Office. They're working on a campaign for the Tory mayoral candidate, who didn't have a hope in hell of winning anyway, and they're not involved in the COVID campaign at all.
Exactly, and that's what I do. You know, that's why I think it makes it worse just looking at the video images, because it was, even up to 2020, December 2020, this was the third lockdown by then. We'd had the initial one in March. We'd had another one in November, just for a month, but then 2 weeks later, it was the Christmas that nobody could see friends, nobody could see family. I spent Christmas alone that year. It's tough going, but, you know, it was much more tougher than other people out there than me. And so watching that video again, it's blood-curdling, it's blood-boiling, because if you're a Conservative at this moment in time, which I very much am, still a supporter, you still want to see the government of this government get its message across to appeal to people. It's the actions of individual Conservatives that have undermined...
And the timing of the leak to coincide with today's vote on the partygate privileges report, no coincidence. Somebody's been sitting on that for a very long time. Don't you think?
I think so, and I think it's... you know, I'm sure if Boris was still in Parliament, they would have wanted this, exactly as you say, to have more of an effect. I don't think it's going to necessarily impact all that much about the vote, if there is indeed a vote later on in the Privileges Committee. But for the people across this country watching...
Well, Labour will push it to a vote, won't they?
Well, you would have thought so, but I mean, they don't have to because, of course, they'll turn up to obviously try and nod it through. But I think there might be some Labour, if they're smart enough on the backbenches, they will call for a vote when the Privileges Committee, when the report is put forward, just to force that issue. But I think, look, you were talking about the process earlier on of other investigations, and I think, again, without sort of repeating my former boss too much, I think he is right that, yes, the report has come to a very, very good conclusion, but the sentence, as
ridiculous,
because of speaking out against a particular process, just to extend another 60-odd days on top, I think is
40 days for lying to Parliament, 50 days for having the temerity to be rude about the stupid committee.
I think, and look, even if you agree with what the committee says and it's come to a good conclusion, it plays into the idea that it's a kangaroo court because you've got a particular member of that committee that themselves, Sir Bernard Jenkins, that's the allegations that he was attending parties. You've now got this additional slap-on penalty just for criticising the committee. I think that is disproportionate, and that's why I think lots of Tory MPs will.
Charlie,
abstain.
just one final thing. As a special advisor, as you said to Michael Gove, what advice would you give to Sean Bailey and Ben Mallet about accepting these OBEs? They can, of course, turn them down.
Bailey's got a peerage.
Yes.
Well, that's the thing.
Of course, peerage,
It's a processy point because it's slightly embarrassing because of that list was proposed by a former Prime Minister. It's been administered by the current Prime Minister. It's gone to His Majesty the King. It's slightly uncomfortable to have to go back to the palace and say, actually, that list we sent you 2 weeks ago. Well, it would be something I think that Boris Johnson perhaps would want to sort of suggest rather than the current administration, just because of process and protocol. But look, there are great people in politics, and I think Ben, as I say, has made a good contribution to the party. He has made a huge error of judgment in this particular video. Look, Sean Bailey will have to answer those questions himself. He can't hide for too much longer, so we'll just have to hear what they have to say.
Charlie Rowley, thank you very much for joining us. And they have also both apologised as well.
They have.
When we saw the stills.
Thanks for coming in.
Right, still to come, Cameron Walker is in Windsor for the Order of the Garter parade and a look back at the weekend's glorious Trooping of the Colour. This is To The Point on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now? Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 10:29. You've got lots of views coming in and lots of people talking about Partygate. Just to remind you, the Privileges Committee report is being debated on the floor of the Commons today from 3:30, 90 minutes. It was going to be a 3.5, 4, 5-hour debate, but there's not enough MPs interested enough.
They're all suddenly very
wants
busy.
to stand.
Yeah.
Funny that. But Margaret says, look, I'm just fed up of Partygate saga. I can't believe it's still going on, as if the country hasn't got bigger issues to deal with. Margaret, you're right.
But the thing is, good morning, Margaret, by the way. There are a lot of people who are still very angry out there. The people that were setting the rules were breaking the rules.
Yeah.
And I think that's the issue here, and especially if you lost someone. And we all know that the second stage of grief is anger.
Yeah.
So a lot of people are angry, and you can't blame them, I don't think, really. John, meanwhile, disagrees with Margaret. He says that Boris is without doubt a liar, and his punishment is what he deserves.
Indeed.
So he would be there voting tonight, unlike a lot of them.
There's quite a few coming in about Meghan Markle, but we haven't talked about that yet, but we'll talk about that a little later
More to come.
in the programme.
And, yeah, all the latest from Windsor, indeed.
Jack?
The lovely Cameron joining us on that. But first, I think we have our morning news with the lovely Tatiana Sanchez.
Dawn, thank you and good morning. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. The Prime Minister is expected to skip a debate on the report that found Boris Johnson lied over Partygate. Rishi Sunak has this morning told reporters it's a matter for the House and not for the government. MPs will decide today whether to sanction the former Prime Minister after the Privileges Committee found he repeatedly misled the House of Commons. The committee recommended that Mr Johnson should face a 90-day suspension had he not already resigned in advance of his judgment. Well, that comes after the Sunday Mirror obtained video footage showing Conservative staff partying during the COVID lockdown and joking about the restrictions at the time. Tory staff can be seen ignoring the government's social distancing rules at the height of the pandemic. 2 of the 24 people at the Christmas party were later handed honours by Mr Johnson. Met Police says it's examining the video. David Warburton has officially resigned as an MP following accusations of sexual harassment and cocaine use. The decision means Rishi Sunak faces another potentially difficult by-election in the Somerton and Frome seat vacated by the former Tory MP. The 57-year-old was suspended from the party in April last year, pending the outcome of an investigation into the allegations. Mortgage rates in the UK have reached a new high this year, increasing costs for borrowers and those who want to purchase a home. A 2-year fixed home loan now has a rate just above 6%, according to financial firm Moneyfacts. Interest rates have been raised 12 times since 2021 in a battle to tame inflation. This morning, the Prime Minister ruled out any extra government assistance for households struggling with payments. And the Home Secretary is urging police chiefs across England and Wales to ramp up the use of stop and search powers. Suella Braverman said officers who use the powers have her full support to prevent violence and save more lives. However, critics of stop and search say it disproportionately targets black and ethnic minority communities. You can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2818 and 1.1729 euros. The price of gold is £1,526 and 21 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100 is at 7,615 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News, investments that matter.
Well, there's lots of pomp and pageantry today at Windsor Castle. It is the Order of the Garter procession. But somebody's missing from the lineup. Yes, Prince Andrew.
Yes, indeed. The Duke of York was barred from taking part in the ceremony last year after Charles intervened at the last minute. But he was allowed to wear the Garter robes at the coronation.
So Cameron Walker is our royal correspondent who's at Windsor. Cameron, I gather he'll be much involved, Prince Andrew, behind the scenes, but we're just not going to be allowed to see him in public.
Yeah, and Andrew, from my understanding, the Duke of York is very much going to be taking part in the lunch in the Waterloo Chamber of Windsor Castle and, of course, the investiture ceremony inside the throne room. But what we won't see is him processing down with other members of the royal family and other knights and ladies of the Garter to St George's Chapel behind me to take part in that service in front of the cameras and in front of the public as well. It is a bit of a conundrum for the King, but like it or not, he is still a knight of the most noble order of the Garter, Prince Andrew is. And I think we got a sense last month at the coronation that he wants the world to know that because he chose to wear his Garter robes to the King's coronation. The Order of the Garter is the oldest and most noble order of chivalry in Britain. It's a tradition dating back for 700 years or so, and it takes its inspiration from the legends of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. Members of the royal family are knights and ladies of the Garter, but there are, of course, other people as well who have been appointed by the sovereign over time for their service to Great Britain. So the King, we're expecting to see the Prince of Wales and the Queen as well. She was appointed, Camilla was, by the late Queen Elizabeth II last year, and it's all pomp and pageantry really, but up a gear because they're going to be donning grand velvet robes, glistening insignia and plumed hats. As I said, not just royals who are part of the 24 Knights or Ladies of the Most Noble Order of the Garter. Former Prime Ministers Tony Blair and Sir John Major are also going to be processing. Baroness Manningham Buller, the former Director General of MI5 as well. Now, for the Princess of Wales and Duchess of Edinburgh Sophie, they are not ladies of the Garter, so they are not expected to be in robes today. There are two new appointments this year who will be personally invested inside the throne room of Windsor Castle a little bit later by the King. Baroness Ashton, former Labour Government Minister and EU diplomat, and also the former Governor General or Governor of Hong Kong, Lord Patton, as well. As I said, there'll be a lunch in the Waterloo Chamber. They'll then process down to St George's Chapel for the traditional service. And despite the change in reign, Andrew and Dawn, the traditions still continue.
All right, that's Cameron Walker.
Thank you, Cameron. It's like, I'm just laughing for groaning next to me at the list of names.
Baroness Ashton is becoming a member of the most noble, chivalrous order of chivalry. She was the High Representative for Foreign Affairs when we were in the EU. Hopeless. She couldn't even learn Master French.
Tony Blair's there.
Tony Blair is part of the order, and I'll just tell you what some of our viewers have said here. Tony Blair started an illegal war, this is Anne, in which many thousands died, and socialises with nefarious potentates in the Middle East and Russia, but he's allowed in the Garter procession. Well, he was a former Prime Minister, he's our second longest of the 20th century.
Yeah, so, I mean, the thing is, you do the job and then that's it, you know, even if you only do it for a few days. Good morning, Liz Truss. If you're
Liz Truss will get it soon, I suppose. Matter of time, isn't it? Now, in a few moments, we will have a very, very lively exchange of views on the big stories of the day with Sarah Vine and Bushra Sheikh. We're going to be talking about Meghan Markle's rumoured deal with Dior and David Cameron. Is he to blame for our COVID failures?
This is To The Point on GB News, Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good piece for you.
Good morning, welcome back. This is Dawn Newsom and
Andrew Pearce, who's got a very witchy, wobbly collar.
a witchy wobbly collar. Is that
What's
a new
going on with it?
thing?
Yes.
Right. Okay. Actually, it's actually 10:42, and we are actually joined by 2 rather fabulous people now.
We are,
aren't we? To go through the newspapers.
My colleague on the Daily Mail, Sarah Vine,
and the very gorgeous political commentator, Busha Sheikh. Thank you very much, ladies. Good morning. They are poised to give us. Poised, very poised to go through the stories.
I'm so
of the day
pleased you're
for
going
us.
to talk about her.
Sparkle?
Yeah.
Yeah, we love talking about Sparkle Markle.
Come on, tell us what's going on. Yeah, of course I do.
Well, so Spotify have fired them because obviously the podcast was really boring and worthy and annoying and no one listened to it. And there's talk that Netflix are about to drop them.
Because they've done, what, one?
One thing for 80 million.
Yeah.
So that's quite a lot of cost per show. And they've been called grifters by the chap who used to work for Spotify, which is quite funny.
What does that mean in our terms?
Well, there was a film called The Grifters.
There was.
Yeah,
with what's her name, who was in the Addams Family?
Basically con artists.
Yes.
Yes, please don't sue.
Yeah.
Yes, so he said basically they're con artists and they're awful and... but, you know, no one is allowed to say this because otherwise they get sued.
Yeah.
So, and then the other bit of the story is that Christiane Dior, are apparently going to have her as their muse, face, inspiration, etc.
So she will be a clothes source for Dior.
Yeah, she'll be fashion.
Isn't she meant to? But isn't she
yeah.
meant to be a feminist champion?
Apparently, yeah.
Got that award from Gloria
feminist
Steinem.
Champion, very much about all the feminist brains and intellect, but also about wearing a dress.
Right.
Yes.
The thing I like about it is
having it all.
Yes.
Andrew.
Having
Yeah.
your cake and
Having
eating
all
it,
the money.
unless it's
Yeah.
a birthday cake.
Yeah.
But this is Bill Simmons, is the head of podcast innovation for Spotify. He is quite outspoken, but he's done his own podcast, hasn't he, Bushra? Absolutely saying what a lot of people are thinking. It's like, no one's interested in what Harry and Meghan have got to say unless you're slagging off the royal family.
Right.
You've done that. What else have you got left to say? So surely it's just summing up what most people would think. And basically, they were paid £15 million for less than 13 hours of work.
Yeah, I mean, you know what? Even when you're called a grifter, it's also more than that. Being a grifter is somebody that actually doesn't have anything solid to bring to the table.
Right.
And they tend to just draw from what's going on around them and trying to make a quick buck. And I do see that with Meghan and Harry at the moment, because they're not really bringing anything substantial to the table and talking about real issues, something that people really want to hear. And they have let the entire UK population down. I know there's a small portion of people that still like them, but like me, it's very small. I'm so frustrated, and I think, what are you talking about? Why do you need to stay current? You know, apart from Harry being a prince, why do you need to be current?
Well, they've made this. What they've done is they've eroded their own value by sort of slagging off the royal family to the extent which they have, and revealing all their money shots at once, if you don't mind me using that term. But basically, they've got nothing left to show. So it's a diminishing cycle, isn't it? Because the more they give away, the more they slag people off, the more they have to slag people off, and there's nowhere else to go. Because what they could have done with the Spotify and the Netflix thing is they could have tried to build a proper portfolio of a proper career portfolio full of ideas and actually done something, but they just didn't want to do the work.
No,
that's the thing. I mean, I think that's the main... the subtext of all of this is that they were paid all this money by Netflix and Spotify, and they just didn't show up.
And what have they been doing for the last year?
If they had just shown up and actually got down and done some work and turned up to the meetings and said, OK, this is what... But they haven't done any of that. They've gone, OK, give us all the money and then we'll just carry on swanning around like we normally do.
And being Harry and Meghan, Bushra, must be very expensive because they've got publicists and lawyers galore. They've got 4 or 5 court cases going on at the moment.
They've got the cases, they've got a huge team of people that they have to support and pay
Protection officers, they've got to pay
all
for.
the protection and security. And then the thing with me is when I think about this, I'm like, these guys need to earn their respect back. And I feel like they're not doing that at them. And like, they're not apologetic for the things that have happened in the past. They're not coming forward to say, actually, we want to make amends. This is how we're going to do it. So right now, people are still stuck in the point where they don't care.
But what they misunderstood, see, when you're a royal, you have automatic respect.
That's right.
It's just automatic. That's how the
People
royal
bow
family
and curtsy.
work. People bow and curtsy to you all day long, and no one... So what they did was they thought, we're going to turn our back on all of the royal stuff, but we still want to be treated as though we're royals. But no, because you're not royals anymore. And most normal people, if they go out into the world and sign a contract with a company, are expected to deliver what they've signed the contract for. And that's the category error that they made. They still thought, oh, we're still royal. We don't have to actually do anything.
Do you think she's ever going to write this book we keep hearing she's going to write?
What about? What's it going to be about?
There's one left in the deal. It's a 4-book deal. She's done the children's book. There's one left in the deal.
The children's book was unbelievably done.
Can anyone remember what it was called?
It was called On a Bench or something.
Right.
The Bench?
And I was arguing in a TV debate with a woman called Yasmin Al-Brown, who you'll probably know, who's a great supporter.
Yes.
But there are 1 or 2 of Meghan, and she said the podcasts were brilliant. Were they? So, there were 12. How many did you listen to? 2! And this is one of her great supporters.
Oh, yeah, we used to have to listen to them because they used to drop on a Tuesday, do you remember?
I do.
Every Tuesday was Meghan podcast day, so you had to listen to it. And it was just the same thing with a different filter on it. It was the same thing, empowerment, yada, yada, women, yada, yada.
See, the thing is, Sarah, she actually, this is what I genuinely believe, she thought that she was exceptionally special.
Yes.
And actually, she would have been more special had she just followed Harry, gone down the route of the royal family. That would have made her prestige. That was her opening the doorway for Meghan. And actually, without that, she's just another American actress doing a small part.
In a TV series I'd never heard of until she got engaged to Harry. I'd never heard of Sue.
But apart from the Dior deal, she's also now very good friends with the chap behind the makeup ranges and health and beauty ranges of Jennifer Lopez and Cindy Crawford. So you can buy Meghan's makeup as well.
Oh, lovely. Meghan Markle's become a standard influencer with 2,500 other women that do it. So that's still not anything special.
I mean, I just don't think. I don't know. I mean, I love a bit of makeup myself. I love an eyeliner, but you know, I don't know if I want to buy Meghan's eyeliner. And if you are going to wang on endlessly about feminism and empowerment, it's a bit sad that basically what it boils down to is a dress and an eyeliner.
Yeah, when I read it in the Mail on Sunday, she was going to be how does this fit in? Dior being a clothes horse for Dior with I'm a feminist.
As you say, they've got a very expensive lifestyle to support. Bushra, should we move on to a role that is actually doing some good? This is in the Times today. Prince William has won widespread praise for his crusade to end homelessness.
Yeah, because, look, he's also the patron of another charity called Centrepoint, and they help young homeless people. And I think this is lovely, this is brilliant, because we know that...
Centrepoint was very, sorry to interrupt, was very linked to his mother.
Yes, yes.
Where she made her speech pulling out of public life with Jeffrey Archer by her side. About that. But that was at Centrepoint.
Those were the days.
Yeah.
And it's almost like, you know, he is carrying her name on, he's moving this forward, and we know that when we live in a first world country like Great Britain, we can't have people who are homeless, you know? So this is something which I think is just amazing that he's actually willing to do this. And it's a 5-year plan, and building houses on royal land. So this is something, a 5-year plan. We won't know and have the details of this plan just yet. But I think it's a really, really good step forward. And I think people are really going to warm to him even more so than they already do.
I mean, I think this is a classic example of how a royal should behave.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, contrasting William with Harry and Meghan, you know, he's got himself, you know, he's got himself a cause that it's a very good space for him to be in. It's important. It's not. It is political, but it's not sort of super political. I don't, you know, all parties.
We all agree, don't we?
You know,
we've got to sort out homelessness.
And I like this idea of using his own land, because the royal estate has vast tracts of land, most of which is not used, and I think. You know, I think that generosity is very important. You know, his job is to keep the monarchy relevant. It's to take it forward. It's to make sure that people remain in love with it. And I think he's doing that very successfully.
There are echoes of his... Yeah, but there are also echoes of his mum, aren't there?
Yes, exactly. Who was a very nice woman, I think, you know, and really wanted to... I mean, you know, she did a lot of... She did amazing things for the AIDS campaign.
Yeah.
And, you know, she was genuinely... And he has that element. He has, you know, Harry has all his mother's bitterness, and William has sort of all his mother's...
good bits.
It's quite interesting, yeah.
And, and again, it's how you make modern royalty work.
Yeah.
And because he's Prince, because he's a future king, because he's the Prince of Wales, house builders will come and talk to him.
Yeah.
They just will, because that's how it works.
And also, I think at the moment, you know, we've got this other big story, which is obviously we'll come to in a second, which is the interest rates and the fact that people are really struggling to pay their mortgages. You know, the rates going up. So, you know, people are going to have to... Housing is going to be an issue on a number of levels, I think, and he's on it, you know.
It is actually striking at the core of what people are thinking. Moving on to the Daily Mail, the front page of the Daily Mail there, Sarah. Bank told to wait before imposing another rate hike is a story, again, we're discussing this morning. What are your
Well, I mean,
thoughts on
this
that?
is a perfect storm, because interest rates have been artificially low for a very long time, which has caused huge house price inflation. So people have been able to borrow more, and therefore they have paid more for their houses. So they're now sitting in houses which are probably overpriced, for which they paid a lot. And now they're, you know, they probably got in at sort of 2%, maybe 3%, and now they're facing 6%, possibly more, 6.5%. I think 6.25 this morning. And that is a really big increase. That's, you know, some people will find their outgoings doubled for their houses, and on top of that, you've got the cost of living prices, which
it also puts rent up as well, Sarah. These interest rates going up because
a lot of
landlords
people,
have got mortgages too.
People will come out of these. So there will be people who will have to sell their houses, and you and I are old enough to remember the disaster that was that last. You know, when we had those 15% interest rates in the 90s, people will have to sell their houses. They'll have to come out of their houses and go into rented accommodation. And so then that's a whole other issue that, you know, there aren't enough places to rent. There aren't enough, you know, there aren't enough places to rent anyway. Renting is very difficult. My ex-husband has made it easier to rent. He's made some very good changes, I think, including now people being allowed to have pets, which I think is really important, because that was always a big issue when you're renting, that you can't have a dog or a cat, and I think that's wrong. But anyway, that's a little tidy thing. But I think this is a huge...
Yeah, it is big.
This is a huge thing. This is a huge thing. And you can't... And Britain is an economy based on the housing market.
Yeah.
That's most people's nest egg. Most people's...
Yeah.
The only money they have really is in their house.
And you
if
think about leaving it to your grandchildren.
Yes, exactly. And if you attack that or undermine that, you are absolutely finished.
Yeah, I mean, like, essentially, this boils down to one thing, which I know, which was at the point where the interest rates were the lowest at that time, and you're right, that was like a false time. Had people have had better financial understanding and education, they would have known that actually this can't last. This can't last. And it's not normal. So the interest rates that we're seeing now are the more average ones that we should be. What I tell people now is, expect this to be your new normal. You know, just have this as your new normal. Do not even think that interest rates are going to drop as they were before, and live like this.
Bank of England should have raised them more gradually rather than...
Well, they should sort of sit about 3% below the rate of inflation. That's about right, you know, but they weren't.
Well, we'll have you two back again to carry on talking about what's on the post. We have to go now. More to come. Liam Halligan to discuss finances further after this short break.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. It's generally a showery picture as we start off the new working week. It's all due to low pressure that is in control of the weather across the UK, bringing unsettled conditions, particularly so for Scotland first thing. This occluded front has been pushing its way northwards overnight, bringing some heavy rain, and there is a rain warning in force until 12 o'clock today. Could be some surface water issues until that eventually clears. Will be quite breezy across the northeast as well throughout this morning. A drier start to the day elsewhere, but into the afternoon the sunshine is strong and it will help develop some showers. They could be locally heavy with some thunderstorms, particularly for parts of Northern Ireland and maybe southern Scotland later on. Generally further towards the south and east, staying drier with some sunshine, and in that sunshine climbing to highs of 25 or 26 degrees Celsius. As we head into the evening, there'll be some late sunshine for many of us, and the showers will gradually ease their way off, taking longest for parts of the north and west. But clear spells developing overnight. Might see some isolated mist and fog patches forming underneath those clear skies. Remaining quite humid for many of us, particularly across southeastern areas of England as we feed in this cloud and rain from the continent. Temperatures holding up around 14-15 degrees Celsius, but might drop into single figures in some rural areas. Throughout Tuesday, then, we are watching this area of heavy rain push up from the south. There is still uncertainty in regards to the exact details and track of this, so do stay up to date with the forecast, but it could bring some torrential downpours of rain with some thunderstorms as well. Whilst it'll be a drier start for Scotland and Northern Ireland, again, heavy showers and thunderstorms could develop into the afternoon, and some surface water issues are possible. Temperatures, if you see some of the sunshine, climb to highs in the low or mid-20s. So we head towards the middle part of the week. High pressure is wanting to reclaim control, so the showers will generally become fewer and less intense as we head towards Thursday, and it'll also be that little bit less humid. Bye-bye.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is To The Point on GB News with me, Andrew Pearce, and she's...
Dawn Neeson, evidently, yes. Right, OK, Boris Johnson, yes, him again. He's 59 today, happy birthday. And he will get a rather unwelcome present from the House of Commons when his former colleagues vote on the partygate report, which accused him of lying. But many Tory MPs are expected not to turn up, including the actual Prime Minister.
And the Chancellor, and the Transport Secretary, and the Housing Secretary.
They're all very busy all of a sudden, aren't they?
Apparently.
Yes. Meanwhile, unfortunately, mortgage misery for millions of us. The Bank of England may raise rates again this week. Homeowners face huge increases in their repayments as the fixed-rate deals come to an end. But the government says there's nothing it can do. But this isn't about what we think, it's about what you think. So get in touch, gbnews@gbviews.com.
Plus, the new NHS fat-busting clinics designed to offer intensive weight loss support to thousands of children. A positive scheme, or is the government overstepping the mark and getting too involved again? I tell you, I know so many people who are taking this NHS drug to stop them being obese, and it's working.
I just love the fact we're showing footage of Boris Johnson jogging.
Well, he is obese.
Well, yeah, but he's trying to do something about it.
Yeah.
But in any case, come on, let us know what you think about these. It's not about what he
Boris
thinks.
Johnson is 5 stone
not about
heavier
what you
than
think.
me, and he's shorter than me.
Yeah, is he
Yeah.
shorter than you?
Yes, he is.
Wow, didn't know that. Learn something new every day. Do you go jogging?
Yep.
Not in those shorts?
No.
No, not in those shorts. Anyway, so it's not about what he thinks, definitely not. Let us know, gbviews@gbnews.com. But first, let's get you up to date on your morning's news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Dawn, thank you very much and good morning. This is the latest from the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister is expected to skip a debate on the report that found Boris Johnson lied over Partygate. MPs will decide today whether to sanction the former Prime Minister after the Privileges Committee found he repeatedly misled the House of Commons. The committee recommended that Mr Johnson should face a 90-day suspension had he not already resigned in advance of his judgment. However, Mr Johnson's decision to stand down with immediate effect means MPs will no longer be voting on his future in Parliament. Rishi Sunak says he doesn't want to interfere in matters.
Well, this committee was established under the former Prime Minister. It commanded the confidence of the House at the time, and I'm sure that they've done their work thoroughly, and I respect them for that. Obviously, this is a matter for the House, not for the government, and that's why each and individual colleagues will make up their own mind when the time comes.
So are you not going to be there?
I said each and individual colleague will make up their own mind when the time comes. This is a matter for the House rather than for the government. It's an important distinction, and that's why I wouldn't want to influence anyone in advance of that vote.
It comes after the Sunday Mirror obtained video footage showing Conservative staff partying during the COVID lockdown and joking about restrictions in place at the time. Tory staff can be seen ignoring the government's social distancing rules at the height of the pandemic. 2 of the 24 people at the Christmas party were later handed honours by Mr Johnson. Shadow Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds says he accepts the conclusions of the report.
Even I, as a Member of Parliament, am so tired of this Conservative soap opera. I just read that report because it's going to be parliamentary business today. The case is forensically laid out. It is damning. It is absolutely clear and straightforward and accessible in how it analyses what the former Prime Minister did and why that was unacceptable. And that's why I'll be accepting the conclusions of that report and voting for it today.
Some breaking news in the last 15 minutes. The ASLEF union has announced train drivers at 16 rail operators will refuse to work overtime from July the 3rd to July the 8th in their long-running dispute over pay. We'll bring you more on that story as we get it. David Warburton has officially resigned as an MP following accusations of sexual harassment and cocaine use. The decision means Rishi Sunak faces another potentially difficult by-election in the Somerton and Frome seat vacated by the former Tory MP. The 57-year-old was suspended from the party in April last year, pending the outcome of an independent complaints and grievance scheme investigation into the allegations. He told us he's learnt a lesson.
Absolutely idiotic, and I made a ridiculous decision and a silly mistake. I was led down a pathway. I was caught. I was photographed, deliberately set up, and I fell for it. It was naivety and stupidity. There's no question about that.
Mortgage rates in the UK have reached a new high this year, increasing costs for borrowers and those who want to purchase a home. A 2-year fixed home loan now has a rate just above 6%, according to financial firm Moneyfacts. Interest rates have been raised 12 times since 2021 in a battle to tame inflation. This morning, the Prime Minister ruled out any extra government assistance for households struggling with payments. The Home Secretary is urging police chiefs across England and Wales to ramp up the use of stop and search powers. Suella Braverman said officers who use the powers have her full support to prevent violence and save more lives. However, critics of stop and search say it disproportionately targets black and ethnic minority communities. Sir Keir Starmer is pledging to cut bills, create 500,000 jobs and provide energy security for the UK. The Labour leader announced in Edinburgh new targets for the UK to have clean energy by 2030 and 50,000 jobs in Scotland alone. But unions are opposed to Starmer's plans to ban new oil and gas exploration in the North Sea. He's vowed the party will fight for the working people.
The biggest opportunity we've had in decades to make the country work for working people. And this is always the test for Labour. The purpose of my Labour Party, all the changes we've made are for this: to face down an age of insecurity, protect, serve and deliver for the aspirations of working people.
Charities have told the Prime Minister they're deeply concerned that the government won't meet its target of ending rough sleeping in England by next year. In a letter to Rishi Sunak, the organisation said the data shows we're going backwards in terms of meeting the goal. More than 3,000 people were sleeping rough on a single night in autumn last year. That's up 26% on the equivalent total for the year before. You're with GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now, though, it's back to Andrew and Dawn.
Well, I can't think there's many people who haven't seen that appalling video of Tory people working on the Tory London mayoral campaign in Tory HQ, revelling in Christmas spirit days after the national restrictions in lockdown were tightened. Appalling. Michael Gove, the Housing Secretary, has apologised profusely, as you would expect him to.
Isn't it amazing? It's like we knew this party had happened. People have, you know, been taken to task for it and apologised. But it's seeing those moving images that makes it worse,
I know.
Isn't it?
And for people listening, they're drunk, they're dancing badly, and there was an image there of a chap in red what do you call those?
Braces.
Braces, thank you very much. He's called Ben Mallet, and he got an OBE in Boris Johnson's resignation honours list. The party was being held by the Tory mayoral candidate who did badly, Sean Bailey, who got a peerage. Labour are now saying they should rescind both those honours should be rescinded.
They're even joking about breaking the rules, aren't they?
But don't stream this because it would look bad.
Why are they doing it? What is it? I mean, Andrew, you've worked in Parliament for a long, long time now. Is this arrogance?
Yeah.
Or is it stupidity?
Both.
Right.
And then, ultimately, drunken behaviour. But the table is laden. It's straining under the weight of party food. Look, I think the restrictions were too draconian, too severe, but they were imposed by the government that they work for.
This is the problem, right? OK, I mean, I will admit that, you know, certainly as the pandemic went on, I bent the rules. You know, I did bend rules, I admit that. But I wasn't setting the rules. I wasn't stopping people saying goodbye to loved ones as they died, or a friend of mine who was literally locked out of a hospital so he couldn't see his wife give birth. You can never have those moments back in life. So completely understand why people are so angry about this. It's just...
Peter Brown's political commentators, whether Peter, no excuse, is there?
No, there's not at all.
Because we'd seen the still photograph.
Yeah.
And that had been investigated by the police on that basis, but they're now looking at it again. But there is no excuse. That is a complete breach, shattering of the rules.
100%, and I think, like you said, it's the fact they've openly admitted on the video that they're breaking the rules. I think that has made it 10 times worse. But I think this has reopened a lot of old wounds for people. Like you said, it's people who couldn't say goodbye to loved ones, people who missed birthdays and christenings and weddings and big life events that were missed. And I think that it's, like you said, there's something about moving pictures to this that has really kind of brought it home.
Yes.
And I think this is going to be a significant headache for Downing Street.
And if you remember when, for my mind, the Partygate story really erupted was when we saw the moving images of Allegra Stratton, who was the number 10 spin doctor, practicing for her role, which was going to be taking questions on mic, on camera, with the lobby every day, and laughing and joking, saying, this is being filmed, you know. They were joking about the fact they'd been in a legal party, how would we spin it? And it was game over.
Oh, yeah, it was, to be honest, the minute that there was any kind of allegation, this was game over. I have to admit, I don't understand why CCHQ allowed this to go on as long as it did, and number 10 as well. I mean, these people should have been rounded up and booted out of the party pretty quickly, and I do think that those who are implicated in this video should consider their positions very carefully moving forward, and any kind of peerages. I have to admit, because of how this looks to the public, I think it's absolutely terrible.
Ben Mallet, OBE, who's yet to get his OBE, is an advisor to Moz Hussain, who's one of the three candidates hoping to be the Tory mayoral candidate. That's exactly the person he was working for last time, Sean Bailey, who, by the way, had no chance of becoming mayor.
Yeah.
Should he consider, should the candidate sack him?
I would probably look to the candidate to sack him, personally. I don't think his position is tenable. I mean, this is going to follow him, and he's going to follow, if Moz moves forward as the candidate, this is going to be thrown at him again and again and again. This is who you're allowed to work for you. What else are you going to do? It's an easy attack line for the Labour Party. I mean, if I was running Labour comms, he would be a gift right now.
Does the fact they're only in their 20s make any difference?
I think there is. I go back to what you were saying earlier about, is this stupidity or arrogance? And I do think this is a bit of both. I mean, I'm not, like we said, we all did bend the rules and everything, but like you said, we weren't the ones setting the rules. And I do think we kind of have to give a little leeway, but there has to be a firm kind of hard line on this stuff now, because I do think the country wants to move on. I do think the country is a little sick and tired of this stuff, and they want to see somebody actually punished in this. We've not really seen... We've seen a couple of fixed penalty notices and all the rest of it, but I don't think the public have really been a kind of appeased of their anger over this story.
No, we haven't, and we are having the inquiry now
Boris
into
lost
what
his
went
job.
wrong.
Yeah, that's true. But I still think it's one of those where it's not really the public want blood or anything. I think they just want to see more actual action taken against these people.
I think what the public don't want is another inquiry that goes on for years and years and years, where everything has moved on. The people that are responsible are possibly not even alive anymore. This has happened in the past, hasn't it? So I think what the public are sick of is the length this inquiry takes. But there are a lot of very angry people out there who want answers. Now, as we know, Rishi Sunak is meeting the Swedish Prime Minister today, who got the inquiry over and done with in Sweden within 6 months.
They didn't hold any public hearings at all. Whereas we specialise in that.
Yeah.
We've got David Cameron up today.
Yes,
if anything interesting is said, and there's a big if there, we'll bring it live, of course. But Sweden have done and dusted. It's brushed out. It's done.
It is going to be interesting, this COVID inquiry. I know there's a lot of people around Westminster that just don't have any faith in it at all. I think the public don't even know what they're actually looking into, because, I mean, a lot of people have asked me today, why is David Cameron up there, like today? The people want answers over decisions that were taken over COVID.
Yeah.
And, of course, it's one of these things, what do you look for this inquiry to be? is it kind of to punish wrongdoing, or can we learn a lesson from it and moving forward? There's two ways to look at this inquiry, and I think they're kind of butting heads at the moment, but we'll have to wait and see.
I think they should put the Chancellor in the chair first, because he was the Health Secretary, the longest-serving Health Secretary in British history, and there was, in his diary, time that there should have been preparations for a pandemic in case one occurs.
Yeah.
And that preparation
I think he's up on Wednesday, isn't he? I think Jeremy is supposed to be. Supposed to be. I think it was under. I think the phrase was something to do with his scheduling or whatever. But I think he'll probably wait to see how well it goes for David Cameron today, George Osborne tomorrow, and because he's the last still sitting member of the cabinet and of the government from that period, really. So it'll be interesting to see what his answers to that.
The really meaty stuff in the next few months is going to be all about the vaccine rollout. Well, the Tories won't mind that, because they did that rather well.
Absolutely. But I think it's really important, Peter, that it doesn't become just a blame game.
Yes, I think you're right
you
there.
did this, we want your head on a stick type thing. As long as something constructive comes out of it and we do learn from it, and we can protect certainly the vulnerable. Should this happen again, like care homes?
Yeah.
Hello, that ring of steel.
I also think it's important that we... But like you said, it's not just a blame game, but also that we do hold people responsible for the decisions that they made at the time. And what did we know at the time? And there's a lot of people that keep looking back with kind of hindsight over this stuff. Yeah. And we can't do that, because that's not fair. Yeah. If we learn something like 6 months or a year after a decision was taken, then I don't think we can really hold them that accountable for that decision. We've got to judge people on what they knew at the time.
And we've got 4 years of this inquiry.
Yeah.
Bet you can't wait, Bev. I mean...
Thank you very much. That's fine, thank you.
Peter's laughing. He thinks that's very funny.
It was very funny, thank you. I was actually doing some work here that time, because someone's got to.
Yeah, Peter Barnes, thank you very much. Well, we are talking about a big day for Boris Johnson, because it's the big vote tonight on the Privileges Committee report. Except it's not going to be a big vote, because a lot of cabinet ministers won't be there, the Prime Minister won't be there, the Housing Secretary won't be there, I don't think the Chancellor's going to be there, the Transport Secretary's not going to be there, and a lot of Tory MPs will not vote because they think the sentence was too draconian.
And Boris doesn't want people to go and sort of like defend him, because he's a bit worried about how many people will actually do it, and people might think, well, they've only got 5 mates left.
Exactly. Joining us now at Westminster is our reporter Olivia Utley, live from Westminster. Olivia, this is going to be, I think you used the expression earlier, Boris Johnson's reign, call it what you will, just sort of going to fizzle out a bit here, because this vote, I'm even hearing from people sending me text messages saying, not even certain there'll be a vote.
Absolutely. It sounds as though it's all going to be a bit of a damp squib. Rishi Sunak has been working very hard to take the heat out of the situation. He's got Conservative MPs on a one-line whip, which essentially means they're allowed to choose whether or not they bother to turn up to this vote. And he's also been sort of tacitly encouraging them to go and campaign in the constituencies where there are going to be by-elections, including Uxbridge, which is, of course, Boris Johnson's old constituency. He himself, as you said, isn't going to be there. He's conveniently got an urgent meeting with the Swedish Prime Minister, and a number of other cabinet ministers have indicated that they aren't going to be there either. So the debate is going to start at about 3:30. It could technically go on till late into the evening, but actually, from the sounds of it, it'll only be a couple of hours long. And then, as you suggested there, it is quite possible that it doesn't go to a vote at all. The Speaker of the House, Lindsay Hoyle, will stand up and essentially ask MPs whether they want to wave through the findings of the Privileges Committee report. Now, if a few of them stand up and say no, perhaps a couple of Boris Johnson's allies might do that, then it'll go to a vote. But the whisperings in Westminster at the moment is that that is quite unlikely. Even Boris Johnson's allies have been told by Boris Johnson himself to sort of stand down and stay quiet, because, it seems, Boris Johnson is potentially worried about the embarrassment of, if only 5 or 6 MPs, stand up to defend him, then will it look as though he hasn't got very many friends left in Parliament at all? So it could be simply that this is a debate which doesn't go to a vote, and everything, as you say, sort of fizzles out. And it's all a bit of a moot point anyway, given that Boris Johnson has already resigned and stepped down as an MP.
Olivia, of the video of those cretins at Tory HQ laughing and dancing and drunk and falling over themselves during lockdown restrictions and joking about the restrictions, joking about we mustn't let any of this be streamed, couldn't be more... Well, it was clearly time for today to coincide with the vote.
Well, absolutely. And I think that the sort of live question here is what to do about that Ben Mallet, who's due to receive an OBE in Boris Johnson's resignations honours list. Most people have sort of made up their minds about Partygate one way or the other. And of course, seeing this is pretty shocking, pretty horrible, but it's unlikely to sway many minds. But these resignation honours, they do matter. Boris Johnson's list has already been under quite a lot of scrutiny. He's given Charlotte Owen, a 29-year-old, a peerage. She'll be the youngest peer ever to sit in the House of Lords. Ross Kemsler as well, another advisor to him, only in 31, who's been given a peerage by Boris Johnson. Labour has said that this has made a mockery of the whole system. And Keir Starmer this morning has even said that he would go as far as scrapping resignation honours lists altogether. So should Rishi Sunak now go and revoke that OBE awarded to Ben Mallet? He only waved through Boris Johnson's honours list in the first place in order to give a sort of olive branch to the former Prime Minister, which Boris Johnson pretty roundly threw back in his face. Will Rishi Sunak now take any action on that? To me, it feels relatively unlikely, simply because Rishi Sunak is determined not to let Boris Johnson distract him. Any media appearance you see with Sunak at the moment, he will be talking about his 5 priorities for the country, and he does not like Boris Johnson being brought up at all. So I think he will probably try and let sleeping dogs lie. But will that be politically possible?
Fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm with you, Olivia. I don't think he's going to do anything about it. I mean, Ben Mallet might decide himself to give up the OBE, but why would he?
I think I would.
Yes.
I think I would, just to take the heat off myself.
Yeah, well, it would also
Don't
take the heat off the Tory party,
Tory
which
party,
is
the mayoral
damaged.
thing. Yeah, absolutely.
Which is damaged.
Yeah.
And this will be used in the mayoral campaign because, look, we're electing the next mayor of London in this great conurbation where we are next May.
Yeah.
The current mayor...
Ben's involved in that?
Yeah, and what's our current mayor called?
Sadiq Khan.
Running for a third time, like we need him. And of course, the Tories think they're in with a shout this time because of the introduction of the ultra-low emissions zone.
Absolutely,
Every one of the 32
issues.
London boroughs, £12.50 a day. If you're going into central London, £15 a day congestion charge. That's putting a huge burden.
This is a Labour mayor who is supposed to be for the working man and woman.
You've got your white van.
Punishing them because you can't afford to go and upgrade your van.
No, and because your car has to be compliant with these the new regulations, all to do with net zero. And if your wheel goes into the EULA zone, even for 100 yards for a few seconds, you charge because there are cameras everywhere, and it's already bringing in millions of pounds in fines. It's a stealth tax.
But it is a stealth tax.
And the Tories are opposing it.
Because if you can afford it, to pay the fines every day, it's fine, you just drive in.
You do.
So it's not really about the air, is it? The air quality? No. It's all about making money.
But if you're a white van man doing your building and all that, that's a lot of money.
For the Labour Party I meant to be for.
Absolutely.
Yes, right, OK. Well, still to come, Liam Halligan explains the latest mortgage misery for millions of us, and economic news. Oh, you're with GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good morning. It is 11:25 now. You're with Andrew Pearce and me, Dawn Neeson, on GB News, and this is To The Point.
It is, and the squeeze on mortgage holders is tightening. We think the Bank of England may hike rates again this week, 13th time in a row.
13! It comes as the government is under pressure to fulfil its pledge to halve inflation by the end of the year.
So the man who knows everything is Liam Halligan, who has been predicting, our economics and business editor. I think as early as April you were predicting this is where interest rates were going to go, Liam.
Sure, and I was calling for interest rates to rise back in March 2021.
Yeah.
And Andrew Bailey was
Governor of the Bank of England,
dismissing such ideas as ridiculous, saying inflation's transitory, don't worry, old boy, but here we are. Let's have a look at some numbers, Andrew and Dawn. The basic problem we've got is that the UK still has high inflation. We are an inflation nation. Our inflation rate in April, it was 8.7%. That means in April, prices across a basket of goods were 8.7% more expensive than April 2022. And a lot of people would say that's a massive underestimate of reality. Food price inflation's up at 19%. Crikey. The Bank of England target, of course, is 2%. So we are way off beam. We're expecting an interest rate rise to 4.75% this coming Thursday. That's up from 4.5%. But it may be that the Bank of England's rate setters on the Monetary Policy Committee really go to town and push interest rates all the way up to 5%. That's up from just 0.1% during the pandemic. Massive increase. That will be the 13th interest rate rise in a row. What does that mean for mortgages? Well, of course, everyone's mortgage is different. You might have a fixed, you might have a variable, you might be on a 2-year deal. But the average 2-year fixed deal, as recently as June 2021, the interest rate on that was 1.91%. These are figures from the website Moneyfacts. Now look where they are. In February 2023, with inflation and interest rate rises, the average 2-year fix went up to 5.07. And now, Andrew and Dawn, as of today, the average 2-year fix has gone above 6%, 6.01. Wow. What does that mean? On the average mortgage for the average family with the average what we call loan to value, the amount of loan compared to the value of the house, it's $2,500 almost a year. That is massive. These are average numbers, right? These are average numbers. Now, if you think that the average income, right, is about 30 grand, so after tax it's quite a lot less. An extra $2,500 a year, that's the increase in your mortgage on average. At the moment, we aren't feeling this so much because fixed rate deals are only unwinding gradually. But if you think back, fixed rate deals are generally 5, 3 or 2 years.
Think back 2 years, think back 3 years, think back 5 years. Interest rates were 1% or lower in terms of the Bank of England. Bank of England rates are now heading for 5.5%, 6%. They're already at 5.25%. So the incremental increase in mortgage costs is going to be absolutely huge. And I'm not here to scare people, but I am here to try and knock the media, frankly, out of its complacency.
Well,
forget about Boris. Forget about MPs warring. Forget about this nonsense. People want to know what's happening with their homes.
On my front page, the Daily Mail, bank told to wait before imposing another rate hike. We've been on this for a while now.
We have been on this for a while, and the reason people are saying that is because interest rate rises, as I've just tried to demonstrate, because the fixes haven't yet unwound. You know, 3/4 of mortgages are fixed, but of course those fixes end. And around 150,000 fixes a month have been ending over the last 3 or 4 months. Wow. So more and more households are getting drawn into these much higher interest rates.
What if we get a bigger drop in inflation than we expect?
Well, we've got an inflation number on Wednesday. It's a huge week for economics.
Yeah.
It's a huge week for economics. You're going to be seeing a lot of me. On Wednesday, we've got the next inflation number, the inflation number for May. As I just said, it's 8.7% in April. Now, inflation in America is all the way down at 4%, right? Unless we see a really big drop, the Bank of England is not going to have the guts, frankly, to not raise interest rates. That's where we are.
Where do you think it will be, the inflation figure?
It's very difficult to say. I'm hearing through the grapevine that it may still start with an 8.
Oh, no.
Wow. If it doesn't start with a 7, it will... at most, it will be a major disappointment. And this is because of ongoing energy price rises, even though wholesale energy prices have dropped hugely. Ongoing food price inflation, even though food wholesale prices have fallen dramatically. It seems to be a particularly British thing. It's nothing to do with Brexit. Germany, France, they've all got high food price inflation as well. But but they also subsidise their energy prices a lot more than we do. And France has got nuclear, of course, which meant it's largely escaped the worst of this energy crisis. The Americans have got shale, their energy prices are low. It's the combination in the UK of high food price inflation and high energy price inflation. We can't shake off this cost of living squeeze. And the more the cost of living squeeze is seen through the headline inflation rate, the more a Bank of England that has lacked credibility, frankly, lacked communication skills, is going to have to be seen to keep raising those interest rates.
This is probably a really stupid question, but is controlling inflation, is it a price worth paying by doing it in this way, by putting the interest rates up so much, so fast, and making homeowners suffer and ruining the housing market? Is it actually worth the payoff for the damage to the economy?
When the three of us were young journalists, right, in the 80s, the 90s, these are the debates we were having then. And now a whole new generation of politicians, journalists, homeowners are having to relearn these lessons. It's always difficult, this trade-off between inflation on the one hand and growth on the other. Look, when you have high inflation, you have no investment, OK? Companies are so worried about what's going to happen, their costs and all the rest of it, the cost of labour, that you end up getting both high inflation and low growth. That's why economists for a long time and most politicians say, look, we need to just squeeze this inflation out. The underlying question you've really put your finger on there, Dawn, is this. Are higher interest rates the best way to lower inflation? Now, I've been arguing for some weeks that the Bank of England should pause on these rate rises, and I still think they should pause on these rate rises because it takes so long for these to come through, and they've already done 12. We need to see what happens.
Especially with the fixed-rate mortgages.
Especially with the fixed-rate mortgages. The danger is, though, Dawn, nothing's easy in economics, especially when you're in a situation like this. The danger is, and it's a little bit complicated, so I'll break it down. If you don't raise interest rates, the pound will fall. Why is that? Because investors put money in the pound to take advantage of higher interest rates. If those interest rate rises don't come, they then sell the pound falls. So what, you may say? Well, when the pound falls, because we import so much into this country, we're the second biggest food importer in the world, right? That means the cost of those imports goes up. So if they hold rates, they're going to get inflation, and if they raise rates, they're going to cause even more mortgage pain. Central banking is not easy, but I do think the Bank of England have made a lot of mistakes.
That's Liam Halligan, who is our erudite business.
It's really cheered me up.
Yeah. Now, still to come, the latest NHS fat-busting clinics. Dawn and I don't need to go to either of those. Due to end obesity in children. That's after headlines with...
Tatiana Sanchez.
Thank you very much and good morning. It's 11:33. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. The Prime Minister is expected to skip a debate on the report that found Boris Johnson lied over partygate. MPs will decide whether to sanction the former Prime Minister after the Privileges Committee found he repeatedly misled the House of Commons. The committee recommended that Mr Johnson should face a 90-day suspension had he not already resigned in advance. Mr Johnson's decision to stand down means MPs will no longer be voting on his future in Parliament. Well, it comes after the Sunday Mirror obtained video footage showing Conservative staff partying during the COVID lockdown and joking about restrictions in place at the time. Tory staff can be seen ignoring the government's social distancing rules at the height of the pandemic. 2 of the 24 people at the Christmas party were later handed honours by Mr Johnson. Shadow Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds says he accepts the conclusions of the report. David Warburton has officially resigned as an MP following accusations of sexual harassment and cocaine use. The decision means Rishi Sunak faces another potentially difficult by-election in the Somerton and Frome seat vacated by the former Tory MP. The 57-year-old was suspended from the party in April last year, pending the outcome of an investigation. Train drivers at 16 rail operators will refuse to work overtime for 6 days next month in a long-running dispute over pay. The ASLEF union said its members will withdraw non-contractual overtime, known as rest day working, from Monday, July 3rd to the 8th of July. The walkouts coincide with the first week of Wimbledon. Mortgage rates in the UK have reached a new high this year, increasing costs for borrowers and those who want to purchase a home. A 2-year fixed home loan now has a rate just above 6%, according to financial firm Moneyfacts. Interest rates have been raised 12 times since 2021 in a battle to tame inflation. This morning, the Prime Minister ruled out any extra government assistance for households struggling with payments. And some breaking news in the last few minutes. A man has pled guilty to displaying threatening or abusive writing likely to cause harassment, alarm or distress. That's after wearing a shirt referencing the Hillsborough disaster at the FA Cup final. The shirt referred to the Hillsborough disaster where 97 fans died as a result of a crush at a match between Liverpool and Nottingham Forest in 1989. We'll bring you more on that story as we get it. You can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2183 and 1.1737 euros. The price of gold, £1,522 and 52 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100 is at 7,617 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for physical investment.
Do you want to do this? I can't bother. Oh.
We're back.
We are.
We're back. Sorry. We could tell you what we were doing, but we'd probably be thrown off of
We
air.
were actually talking about Boris Johnson, actually.
Yeah, we were.
Much more later.
We were talking about cake.
New NHS fat-busting clinics are going to offer intensive weight loss support to thousands of children because so many of them are obese.
Absolutely. Now, Lynn Bye, founder of Fat Lat at Black, is joining us. Good morning, Lynn. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Such an important message. Can you tell us more about what you're aiming to do with this?
Well,
The thing is, we had a little look at the NHS website a few weeks ago, and we were slightly amazed, really, at how outdated a lot of the information that's on the NHS website was. So whilst we welcome massively incentives to help children lose weight and incentives for people to become healthier, we also think it's really important that the information that the NHS are giving is correct and it's based on the latest research, not on some outdated concept that I used to believe, I think as most of us do, that if you were fat, it was because you ate too much and did too little. But modern research suggests that that is absolutely not the case, and that actually obesity is a much, much more complicated subject. So we totally welcome more money. Of course, more money, more help, it can only be a good thing. But we just want to make sure that that money is being well spent. And as I say, it's using the latest research, not outdated ideas.
Lynn, you say that you are keen to tackle how we view obesity and talk about fat phobia in society. What do you mean by that?
Okay, so I mean, we all have fat phobia, I think, don't we? Because I think as society, that's something that we've been taught to have. So fat people get paid less. They're generally seen as lesser people by society. They're treated differently to thin people. They don't get promoted as often. There are so many challenges and hurdles for people who are fat. That's part of that fat phobia. We assume fat people are lazy people who are just gluttonous, and that isn't the case. So they do get a very, very rough deal through society. There's a lot of name calling. There's a lot of fat shaming. Our community really does have to be subjected to some really awful things.
Yes. Lynn, just one final quick question here. The problem with the fat shaming issue, I mean, it's obviously wrong to body shame anybody for their size, but we do, I think, end up tiptoeing around the issue where we should be more open about talking about it. So how do you think we should go about that as a society, talking about obesity, but also sort of like not shying away from the fact that obesity is incredibly bad for us?
Okay, so we have a brand called Fat Lad at the Back. We are not afraid of the word fat. A lot of people have been horrified that we use the word fat in our brand name because to them, the worst thing you could possibly be is fat. We don't think fat is such a bad thing. We think there are many other traits that humans have which are much, much worse than being fat. So we're trying to take the word back, if you like, so it can't be used as a weapon against people. When we spoke to our community about the NHS website, many of them were saying, let's educate our children, let's teach them how to eat, let's teach them how to cook, let's give them some life skills which will actually enable them. Let's get people to understand what obesity actually is and what causes it and what the links between genetics and obesity are. If we begin to understand this, then we can break down that fat phobic society. Whilst ever we have the outdated view, people are always going to be negative to fat people and always think that they're not as good as them, essentially.
All right, that's Lynn By, who is the founder of Fat Lat at the Back. It's a great name, isn't it?
It is, actually. Thank you very much for joining us, Lynn, and good luck with all you do, because obviously it's a big problem for youngsters.
Certainly
now.
is.
Yep.
Big being the operative word. Up next, our wonderful panel, Sarah Vine and Bushra Sheikh, rejoin us. This is To The Point on GB News, Britain's news channel, with me and Dawn Neeson.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back. It is 11:45 nearly. You're with To The Point on GB News. And I'm Dawn Neeson, and you are again, keep forgetting.
Yes.
Some bloke called Andrew Pierce. Okay. Now, today is Boris Johnson's 59th birthday. Happy birthday, Boris. Making 3 years since he and Rishi Sunak were famously ambushed by cake.
So he's staying at home, we think, and presumably he'll have a legal party because there are no rules. Unlike the rules that were shattered in that devastating video which the Mirror put in the public domain today.
Yes, absolutely. Now, Boris is at home in Oxfordshire, and joining us now from outside Boris's home, she might have been invited in by now, you never know, she is very good, is our national reporter, Ellie Costello. Ellie, good morning. Hello, Ellie, you're still outside.
Good morning to you, Andrew and Dawn.
Haven't you been invited in yet?
Yes, we've been outside since... Not yet, but we have been outside since about, about 6:30 this morning. But no invite in for tea just yet. We were hoping we might see a tray of tea be brought out to us. That has happened before. Boris has brought cups of tea to the reporters that are waiting outside, but I haven't got my invite inside just yet. But yes, it is Boris Johnson's 59th birthday today, but many would say it might not be quite so much of a happy birthday. In fact, some might see it as a cruel twist of fate that his birthday coincides with this debate, with this potential vote in the House of Commons later into the parliamentary committee report into Partygate. We're expecting that around 2:30 p.m. this afternoon. So it does make you think, how is Boris Johnson feeling today on his birthday? Perhaps he's feeling apprehensive about that vote a little bit later on. We know he felt bewildered and appalled. Those are his exact direct words about the outcomings of that report. Do you think that anger has subsided at all, or perhaps he's still feeling very, very angry today? Perhaps he's feeling like the victim of a witch hunt. But unfortunately, we haven't seen Boris Johnson out on his daily run this morning. Usually he heads out for a run and he gets questioned by reporters. Hasn't done that today. Perhaps he's having the day off because, of course, it is his birthday. But he has told his band of allies in Parliament not to try and vote against the report. He says, essentially, there's no point. It wouldn't have any practical consequence. But there is another school of thought that would suggest that Boris Johnson is actually just trying to take the drama out of the vote this afternoon. He doesn't want that very public display of quite how much or quite how little support he has left in the House of Commons. So perhaps that's what we're seeing with him telling his loyal allies not to vote against it. But we do know that he is going to be here in South Oxfordshire celebrating his birthday today with very close family and friends, having a little party, a gathering, we're told, at home. And a close friend of his has said that, ironically, Boris is the last person to convene a party because he actually doesn't like them. And the irony, of course, being, as you've already alluded to, that this is the 3rd anniversary of Boris Johnson's 56th birthday, and that is the birthday in which he was ambushed with a cake. Remember those photographs of Rishi Sunak as the Chancellor at the time, Carrie Johnson, Boris Johnson and several other friends and aides. They gathered between meetings in the Cabinet Office. They sang Happy Birthday to Boris Johnson and they cut that Union Jack cake. And you remember at the time we were in lockdown, it was rule of 6. You could only meet 6 others outside. And it's for that birthday party during lockdown that Boris Johnson, Carrie Johnson and Rishi Sunak all received those fixed penalty notices. So of course, Boris Johnson might be reflecting on that 56th birthday party. Today, on his 59th birthday, he'll be thinking about everything that's happened since then. And he'll also be thinking about his future. Does he want to move to a safer Tory seat? Does he want to come back as an MP? Perhaps he wants to join up with our very own Nigel Farage and join another centre-right party. Or perhaps he's done with politics altogether. We saw his column in the Daily Mail over the weekend, didn't we? Perhaps that's going to be his future. We also know he's made about £4 million since he left Downing Street on the speaking circuit. So perhaps we're going to see him just making a fortune over in the US at speaking functions. But I think many would like to know, Dawn and Andrew, what exactly he'll be wishing for when he blows out his candles on his birthday cake a little bit later on.
All right, that's Ellie Costello outside Boris Johnson's Oxford House. But Sarah Vine and Bush are shaking. Am I allowed to say this, Sarah? Ellie was saying she hadn't been invited.
You're going to say it in any case, aren't you? So
And I thought, well, if Boris was on his own, he probably would have invited Ellie, because she's fabulous, she's clever, and she's gorgeous.
I know, she's gorgeous.
You
did just say that, by the way. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, everybody was thinking it.
Well, I would have actually brought a mug of tea out for the reporter standing outside, wouldn't you?
In my young reporter's days,
I was breakfast in bed.
Yeah, but my young reporter's days, the times I was on a doorstep, we call it, and tea would be brought out, and what you really wanted to do was just go home. Because you're there for hours and hours.
It is, yeah, and Ellie still does look fantastic.
She does it brilliantly.
So, as you might have noticed, we have been joined now by our Sarah Vine, columnist on the Daily Mail, and Bush Sheikh, political commentator, to discuss very briefly, because we're running out of time, some of the other stories in today's newspapers. Right, which one do we want to go first?
This gender one.
Yeah,
Come
on,
that really
okay.
This is really worth it, actually.
Yeah.
I've just retweeted it. There's a recording of an exchange between a teacher at Rye College and a pupil, I think it's a year 8 pupil, so probably 14 or 15. Right. And the girl has obviously had some sort of altercation with someone else in the class because she said that you can't identify as a cat, which I think we would all agree is a fairly sort of
I speak as a cat lover. I could not identify as my cat.
I would not want to. Anyway, the teacher just lays into this girl. And actually, funny enough, she's only year 8. She's actually very calm and cogent in her response. And it's a really interesting insight into how the trans lobby are bullying, and I would use that word, it is definitely bullying. Do listen to it if you can, it's worth a listen. Very young children. I mean, this is a person in authority, this is a teacher. She's being quite threatening, isn't she, Bushra? I mean, we were both listening to it in the break. It's really not very nice.
Saying it's outrageous that she's not prepared to accept somebody can identify as a cat.
Telling her that if she doesn't agree, then she can find another school to go to.
She actually deserves to lose her job.
Yeah, I agree.
That exchange with that student is unacceptable. Had that have been
In front
my
of the whole class as
in
well.
front of
Yeah.
the
whole class.
imposing her opinions. Everyone is free to think how they want. That's not her job as a teacher. Actually, when Sarah showed it to me, because I briefly looked at it yesterday, I was horrified. And this ties in really nicely with Rishi Sunak saying that schools are going to be banned from letting children change their pronouns if the parents say no.
Or if the parents don't know.
And
They've got to tell them. They've got to tell
So
them.
this is a really important time for kids, you know, and parents to understand that actually the responsibility and all of that comes from the parents.
How did it get to a point where a school thought a child can say, I'm no longer a he or a she, and school doesn't have to get on the phone with mum and dad?
Talk to the parents. I mean,
A young
How
child.
did we get to that?
I mean, it's just, but this recording is extraordinary because it's absolutely, it encapsulates the aggression of these people who claim they're just all about being kind. They're not. That this teacher is being really unkind and horrible to this young
And
girl.
that young kid, she stood up to her well, didn't she?
Who is standing up and just making her case and saying that, I'm sorry, miss, I don't agree with what you think. I don't think what you're saying is reasonable. And this woman is just losing it.
On a similar note, I mean, Rishi Sunak has also been taken to task for making a joke about, you know, he's all for teaching maths, loves maths, everything, but, you know, he won't want to be teaching biology now. It was a joke.
It was a joke. And the thing is, you know, and you're right, Sarah and Dawn, you know, this is like a level of aggression teamed up with power. I feel like there are many people power tripping on this movement. It's not correct.
Yeah, I mean,
you know what I mean?
A less bold child would have just burst into tears and folded.
But how important is it that we do hear the Prime Minister saying that these schools are not going to be able to carry on like this? Because we want real leadership on this issue.
I mean, I interviewed Sharon Davis last week.
Yeah, the swimmer.
She wrote a book out about swimmers, about doping, about the fact that she was cheated of her gold medal in the 80s because she raced against an East German swimmer who had been receiving testosterone injections, and you know. The whole sort of debate about women's sport and whether male people who've gone through male puberty should be allowed to compete. This is. I think the worm has slightly turned, don't you think?
Feels
I think
like
we're
it.
slightly getting to the stage where a little bit of sensible kind of input is coming into this, but it's taken an awful lot, and an awful lot of people have been totally slandered unfairly as bigoted and you know transphobic.
Bushra, I feel they've got to get on with it quickly, the Tories, because they're probably going to lose the election next year, and we still know Keir Starmer can't define a woman.
Yeah, correct. This is something that is really crucial, and I think that if the Tories do get on this on board and push it very quickly and get the right outcome, they can gain votes again. And the thing is, what's really important right now is there was a stage where safeguarding was paramount for schools and teachers, and I think what happened was a group of people hijacked that, and now we're seeing what we're seeing today.
Do you think this is what, I mean, we're concerned about it, certainly 3 women who, you know, often get cancelled for just talking about being a woman, but do you think this is what people are talking about on the doorsteps when the politicians go out there and ask them? Bushra, do you think they're, you know, the public
I think
engaged?
the public are very engaged with it. I mean, people
I do.
do talk to me a lot about it. I think, unfortunately for the Tories, the thing that's getting the cut through is this ridiculous partygate stuff,
and cost of living,
which is just such an own goal. And this video that the Mirror have released yesterday is devastating.
But you know, it's also about this whole movement of women's spaces, protecting women. If we talk about women's rights, women's spaces are really important. And people are talking about. They're talking about it in classrooms. They're talking about it over lunch with their friends. So this is something that is important right now.
The Tories got to grip it. And sort it. Because it ain't going to happen with Labour.
Just a final word from Bet in Dorset. Good morning, Bet. I and many people I know now are totally sick of being drip-fed partygate stories. Make it stop. And we have to stop there as well. Unfortunately, we've come to the end of our show. It's flown again. I've had so much fun. Thank you for all your comments and for watching. Coming up next is GB News Live with Mark Longhurst. This is To The Point with Andrew and me, Dawn. And he'll be back tomorrow at 9:30.
See you then.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety